NYC-DOT, better buses, and look for 181st Street. The draft plan, a first draft plan was presented at the most recent meeting. And while it doesn't get to what hours and days the busway would be in operation or what hours of the day, it did reflect, again, a pretty solid first crack, and also sort of it seemed mindful of the specific concerns raised through that community advisory board, specifically as it related to, and I know for people that have sat on this committee, they'll know this, specifically as it related to looking at the broader area, because the 181st Street can't really be looked at in isolation because so many people move to their surrounding blocks to get around. Not all our blocks are through blocks, as people know. We have a lot of action on that strip, so they are looking sort of 175 to 182. They are being mindful of street vendor issues raised by the bid. They are, although that is a tough nut to crack, and they are, and sort of acknowledged the issues that the neighborhood has, particularly on Friday afternoons. So anyway, if you haven't already, take a look online at that, again, that first draft. I anticipate, but it's not confirmed, that DOT will be presenting to this committee on that matter in November. Second, city bike installation. As most people probably know by now, the first half of the CB12 installation has largely happened. So again, that goes from the southern part of our southern boundary on CB12 to 184th Street. It is too soon for real data. And I'm saying that because I've asked. But anecdotally, it appears that, you know, bikes are definitely leaving those stations. I think they do have issues of bikes not coming back up the hill, because since we're up high, things tend to leave and they don't necessarily come back. But so hopefully there'll be some update from DOT, you know, when more data is available. I know we're all, you know, eager to see that, or I'm certainly eager to see that. As a reminder, DOT will be back to us with the second half of the northern section of CB12 in early 2021. So that's from 184th on up. This is kind of a little bit out of order, but in various fashions, we have a few spots in the district that we have been hearing about as relation to speeding or drag racing or unsafe conditions generally. One thing that's sort of been talked about a little bit at this committee is Riverside Drive, when people are exiting the highway near Henshaw. We continue to hear from community members about that. We have somewhat related to that, although not absolutely directly. Riders Alliance is on our agenda for October with an idea that relates to an alternative to the existing bike lanes are on Dyckman, west of Broadway only, just because that lane kind of doesn't go through anymore because of the dining plaza. Anyway, so Riders Alliance will be here in October to talk about a proposal, an idea that they have. Again, on that strip, DOT did do some signal timing adjustments along that strip, but we're still hearing things. Let's talk about a bigger thing that's coming up, and I think most of this will leave till later in the meeting, but just on the topic of safety and traffic calming and drag racing and excessive speed, there have been 3 major wrecks, accidents on Amsterdam since May. I think May, June, and August were the dates of the big accidents. And hi, Mary. And Yeshiva University led a letter that included signatories from all sorts of small businesses in the area on that area of Amsterdam, as well as electeds, etc. I had them, the idea to have them maybe, to basically have them raise it tonight, but have it on the agenda for October. If we can move things along tonight, it doesn't get too late. I do have it on new business, and then, so we'll come back to it in that fashion. Chanel also distributed to the committee the letter that went out with all the signatories that describes the issue in more detail. As many know, there was a large community forum during the summer about noise complaints of many forms. A lot of community board members were on that session. And a group has formed out of that meeting called, which I know some people on the community board are also involved in, about, a neighborhood group sort of looking to get at this decibel level issue. They reached out to this committee about speed bumps and other tools to address some of the streets related aspects of that. And as a reminder, while this committee used to be quite involved with speed humps, as they're called, about 2 years ago, DOT changed that. So members of the community can go right in on their site and make those requests for speed bumps. So people should be aware that that group has sort of gone through what their recommendations are about that, and put those requests through DOT. But obviously we should all keep an eye out. They were focused on Dyckman between Seaman and the highway, Seaman between Dykem and Isham, and Broadway from 190th to Dyckman. So a lot of stuff sort of surrounding Dyckman, but extending in each of the directions. Next, community district needs will be coming up. I just want people to sort of start thinking about it, because we're going to have to leave all of that. The ranking will happen in October. I will probably circulate just to you all what we had on last year and some ideas I had about maybe new things. So we'll have to get a lot done in that October meeting. So just look out for some communication from me on that sometime in this week. DOT moved forward with the implementation of a project that CB12 provided a resolution on St. Nicholas between 165 and 170. I haven't been down there, so if anybody maybe wants to tell me about it later. As far as I know, that happened maybe DOT can fill us in, like 2 weeks ago or a week ago. And remember, that was an opportunity both to sort out the intersection at 165th and St. Nicholas, amongst other things, as well as 170 in that crazy spot where St. Nicholas and Broadway cross, but also add 20 parking spots just south of 165th 168th on St. Nick. 7th, I think I'm up to Riverside Viaduct project. That is an ongoing project, as people may know. That's, I think, in total a 5-year project, or has about 4 years left or some such. There is a construction liaison who's in touch with the community around there, since well before it started and throughout the project. An issue has emerged with respect to significant vibration, and there is a meeting set up tomorrow between DOT and the community to discuss this issue. Bruce Robertson has kindly agreed to attend that. It's midday. And if anybody else wants to join in on that, I'm sure DOT would welcome anybody, and then maybe hit up Bruce for the meeting information. Thank you, Bruce. This is a little bit maybe more for DOT, but just saying, we continue to have no there is no update on Cabrini street lamps because we still don't have street lights. So looking forward to hearing what that story is. 9th, Washington Bridge. Again, not the George Washington Bridge, the Washington Bridge, you know, which you access from 181st and Amsterdam, is going through emergency repairs. And I also attended a presentation on how that was all going to get done, that very busy artery with a very needed emergency repair. And I assume that that is ongoing and will, you know, take a couple months. So I will have more to say, but just sort of a general comment, as was the case, I'm pretty sure last September. It's always a long meeting when we come back after the break. And so while sometimes I am happy to have a little latitude about conversations, I will try to be a little stricter than maybe is my average, just with the time. Again, people have 2 minutes to speak. But one thing that sort of tripped me up by now is that when a committee member, a board member, even a member of public commenting have a question that's pointed at a panelist, that, and you know, you need to get an answer. We need to have a little more time to accommodate that. So Jim and I are going to experiment, or with Jim's help, with sort of 3 minutes when we have that back and forth. But by back and forth, again, I mean a question and answer that involves the panelist. As usual, Jim would like everybody to remember that back and forth amongst us is not permitted.
If I could just make one tiny emendation. We're talking about not panelists, but presenters. So when a presenter tells us stuff, we are changing. And this isn't, and by the way, a year ago, this committee under Nick's chairmanship did exactly the same thing, where we loosen the rules a little to see if we can do it. And if it works successfully in our committee, then we can loosen the rules for everyone. So when we have this questioning of presenters, you're going to get 3 minutes for the entire set of questions. So, you know, and then we'll go on to the next person. But that's questions and answers, and it's not back and forth. And just to reiterate, and you know, the whole key of Robert's rules is no back and forth discussions between members, because they discovered hundreds of years ago that leads to fights. So that's one of the reasons we don't do it. Thank you very much, Debbie.
All right, thank you, Jim. And just for, you know, stating an intention, like, we are so fortunate to have the engagement of our community, because that's what this is about. It is always amazing to me how many people are like, spend time understanding the issues, providing feedback, following up, letting us know what's happening out there. At the same time, sometimes, or whatever, the tone of how we speak to each other in the current years is challenging. And I know I'm losing some elasticity to respond to that. So I just ask everybody, we're not always going to agree, but like, let's all bring our best selves, and know that I really, really appreciate everybody who makes time in whatever way that they can to either be at this meeting or get to me in some other way, or get to another board member in some other way. And I hope that everybody understands, you know, if ever I'm cutting people off, it's just like, I just want to keep it moving as well. Because at a certain point after very long meetings, you know, we start to, I think, lose our ability to be effective. And tonight, certainly we have some hot topics. So let's just do the best we can. With that, our first up is the DOT team. Again, for the new people, DOT presented a project that addressed a few things in one around the area of like 158th Street from Riverside just about to Broadway. A lot of pedestrian safety kind of issues at intersections, but there was also one component of that proposal that was a little different. And so we passed a resolution supporting the other work, but we took this one bit and said we needed further consideration because it's a dramatic bit. And that's, and so DOT, this is them coming back for our further consideration of this issue. I think we have Kimberly Rancourt, Carissa Lindstrand, and Dan Wagner. Is that right?
That's right. And I'm going to let Carissa and Dan take over. I just wanted to that was a great intro. It was basically what I was going to say, but just to add that this component does have sort of it achieves two or addresses two issues that we've heard a lot about from the community. One is the safety at 158th Street and Riverside Drive, and the other one is the desire for more on-street parking, especially in response to the parking loss associated with the viaduct construction. So that's why this is sort of an exciting component of the project, but we're curious to hear what the board feels after seeing some more information, some more background, and just whether you've had some time to consider this over the summer as well.
All right. Can somebody enable screen share?
So Chanel, that's Carissa Lindstrand on who will need the screen
Yeah, you
share.
should be able to share your screen now.
Okay,
Thanks, Chanel.
perfect. All right. Let me see. Okay. Let me know if the slides don't advance. This has happened before when I go into full screen mode. Okay, I'm Carissa Lidstrand. I'm with the pedestrian unit at DOT, and I'm here tonight with Dan and Kimberly, my colleagues, and we're going to discuss the street conversion on Riverside Drive between 158th Street and Riverside Drive West. So just a little background, because I know a few of you are newer to the committee, and there may be people from the community that weren't on the call in May. So I just want to recap a few things first. So this project as a whole, Riverside Drive from 155 to about 161st Street, we've been talking about it for a year and a half now, starting in late 2018. And
did you already move it?
yeah, I moved it. Is it not working? Okay. Let me
Try not being in full screen. Sometimes that works better. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just leave it at this. So there have been a number of walkthroughs with elected officials as well as community members. Our DOT Street Ambassadors team, as you can see in the photo on the bottom right, has done outreach at 158th Street, talking to people in the community about the intersections along this corridor. And then in May, we presented to your committee to talk about the whole project. Like what was said before, the committee supported the improvements between 155th Street and 158th Street, but wanted us to look more at the design and function of the street conversion proposal that we had. So just to visualize this, what we're looking at is an aerial of Riverside Drive. On the left, we have Riverside Drive West, and on the right, we have Edward Morgan Place and the 158th Street intersection. The area outlined in blue is the area that was supported when we came to the Transportation Committee in May. This included the lane reduction to make it feel more like a residential neighborhood, as well as the concrete medians at 157th Street and the enhanced crossings there. And then the area that you see outlined in red is where we're proposing the street conversion. And that's where we were asked to look at more design options. And so taking a closer look at this intersection, there's been, throughout the community engagement process, there have been a number of conversations about how unsafe it feels as a pedestrian walking in this space, or as someone who is driving through this space, because there are so many different streets. It can be confusing not knowing which street you're allowed to travel on or not to travel on. When our street ambassador team was on site doing a survey, they asked the question, would you support making a two-way street one-way if it could add parking and increase intersection safety? And 69% of respondents said yes. We also have heard that because of the viaduct construction, the community is interested in added parking to the neighborhood. So looking a little bit more at the existing conditions of this intersection, as you can see, there are so many different streets that come into this intersection. There are 6 different ones, and typically an intersection is 4. And so what this does is it creates different angles for the intersection, which makes longer crossing distances for pedestrians. You can see that in the top right photo. It takes 84 feet to get from the west corner to the median. And then this intersection, with it being 6 legs, creates the unclear movements for vehicles traveling through this space. We're also very aware that the BX6 and BX6 SBS travels southbound on Riverside Drive, and we'd like to keep the bus traveling along that route. And then in the bottom right are the vehicle volumes for this intersection. And we've acknowledged that there are low vehicle volumes for the vehicles traveling northbound on Riverside Drive between 158 and Riverside Drive West than there are traveling southbound. So just looking a little bit of the last 5 years of safety data at this intersection, there have been several pedestrian injuries, as well as quite a few motor vehicle occupant crashes. While we don't have all of the details on all of this data, the injuries can point to kind of the safety concerns that we just talked about, with it being a confusing intersection for all modes. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the proposal, but before I jump right into our proposal for tonight, I want to show you what we proposed last time, so we can start with that. So on the right side of the screen, you'll see another aerial of Riverside Drive. The bottom part shows 158th Street, where we were proposing the large concrete curb extension. And then the northern part of the screen shows the intersection partially of Riverside Drive West. So in May, we had proposed to keep the parking along the west curb, and then also add additional parking along the east curb, which is that retaining wall for the park space there, which would include about 50 new parking spaces. We also proposed the large concrete curb extension, which would help reduce the crossing distance for pedestrians. And then through discussion, there were concerns about space for vehicles to load and unload against the west curb, since that's where the residences are. And then because the roadway is a little narrow at times, there was concern about the bus being able to travel smoothly through this corridor. And so we're asked to take a look at the design a little bit more, maybe remove some parking in some spaces, add some loading or unloading along the west curb. So tonight, we're looking at the same image on the right, except along the west curb, we would like to add 2 no standing anytime areas, so that vehicles can load and unload or pick up and drop off people. And then That's highlighted in the pink along the west curb. And then along the east curb, we would like to propose spot parking. So we're acknowledging that this is kind of a curvy road. And so the dimensions of the road varies throughout this corridor. So keeping the parking in kind of the northern and southern ends gives more room for the bus to travel through there. And it also, we keep some of the parking, which is something that was voiced during the community outreach process. And we also still get to keep the concrete curb extension at the intersection of 158th Street. And so we can revisit this, but I just want to talk about the benefits of this conversion. So as you can see in the top right photo, this is the existing condition. If you're a vehicle traveling north on Edward Morgan Place, you have 5 different locations you can travel. The bottom photo shows that when we remove that northbound movement on Riverside Drive, it reduces the number of locations that the vehicle can travel, lessening the confusion, but it also provides more visibility for pedestrians by being able to build out that large concrete curb extension. It reduces that crossing distance for the pedestrians traveling there. As we saw before, getting from the west corner to the median was 84 feet, and that's significantly reduced here. It also adds, we can add time to the signal for pedestrians crossing along that north curb because we're removing that northbound movement. And then also adding about 26 parking spaces with that spot parking. And so knowing that with the conversion comes a diversion route, we wanted to talk about kind of how you might be able to get to those residences if you wanted to travel southbound, or if you used this route previously to travel northbound, say you're going to the George Washington Bridge. There are alternative routes. And one example that we would like to walk you through is the yellow arrow on the image to the right. So if you're at the intersection of Edward Morgan Place, 158th Street and Riverside Drive, and you want to go to a residence that's on Riverside Drive, but you can no longer go northbound, you can follow the yellow route, which is about 2,400 feet to kind of loop around to travel southbound. And if you're a vehicle traveling about 25 miles per hour, it'll take about 3 to 5 minutes extra to get to this location than it would have if you could just take a left previously. And this isn't the only option. It really just depends on where you're traveling from and where you're traveling to. There are options like Broadway, as well as the Henry Hudson. You could go along the northern section of Riverside Drive, as well as Fort Washington. So we can discuss that a little more, but those are some alternatives. Questions? I guess
Thank you, Carissa.
Yeah. I'll just go back to this one.
All right. Let me just go through my committee and see.
Yeah, I have a question. In an early chart, there was this 3-letter abbreviation that had a K in it, and I don't know what that is.
Oh, yes. Is it this one, the KSI?
Right, thank you.
Yes, so that's killed or severely injured.
Ah,
Yeah, not a great acronym. But luckily, there have not been any fatalities at this intersection, but we would like to prevent that from happening by making it as safe as we can.
I mean, I guess I was hoping for a little more diversion information. I mean, I guess that's the key one, but, well, actually, I'm not going to formulate a question. Do I have anybody from TNT who has questions about this? And then I have, Natalie, you have a raised hand. Was that about the recording issue, or do you want to be in line to comment?
That's me joining the queue.
Okay. Just bear with me. I mean, I guess, all right, so I don't have anything else from the committee right now, but before we go to Natalie, and then I guess I want to say that to the extent, so I sort of see two things here. Like, there is a safety issue, pedestrian safety issues related to the six-legged intersection. That is is addressed in a here. But that also a big part of this was sort of to address parking concerns raised by the community when they lost 180 spots to the viaduct project. So I will just say that, you know, that's something that, you know, it sounds like we were trying to address. So I'll be interested to hear from people that live around there. Natalie, why don't you go ahead, and I'm just going to scan to see. I have a lot of raised hands in the, Chanel, can you promote Steve Simon, please? Natalie, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, this is Natalie from the Office of Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer. Just a quick going back into the summary slides where you said that the community board supported or liked the idea. I wasn't quite sure what that was referring to. If that just meant your general, sense of it, or was there a resolution, and what date is that referring to?
So I think you're referring to this one, where we talk about Transportation Committee's supported changes. Is that correct?
Correct. And
Okay.
so
So it was for this section here, the blue. So between about 155th to 158. It was the May 4th, I believe, Transportation Committee presentation that we gave. This was supported, but we needed to look a little bit more into the conversion and diversion.
Okay, but you're inferring support just from the discussion, but not because a resolution was issued, right?
Deborah, correct me if I'm wrong, but
No, we did issue a resolution. We said.
Yeah, we did, definitely. It was a
And-
Yeah,
and-
we passed, right. We passed a resolution to capture everything in the blue space and the blue lines, and we moved this, you know, what we've just seen the presentation on for
The red
further-
line, we moved the red
further
line to
consideration.
September.
Right. So this is our further consideration.
No, I appreciate that because the resolutions are not all posted online yet, as far as I could find.
Ah,
I had one in February, but there wasn't anything added since, so I hadn't been working on that. But thank you.
okey-doke. Okay. I mean, okay. All right, I have a few raised hands amongst attendees. I don't know what order they happened, so I'm just gonna take it for how I see it on my screen. Is there a Lawrence Lee still here? And you can go ahead. Oh, and Bruce, oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
Debbie,
yeah.
when you get a
Oh.
chance, I also have a few questions.
Oh, okay. So actually, I'm sorry, Mr. Lee. I'm going to redo what I said. Bruce, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, in light
Okay.
of the viaduct project, starting another project along Riverside Drive adjacent to it might be really disruptive to the pedestrian and traffic flow, because the viaduct project is like, it's like a war zone over there, and it's so I guess the question to DOT is, when did you originally you had anticipated starting this like now, but I'm having second thoughts about how much tumult there would be with yet digging up Riverside Drive at the
Yeah,
same time. And that's
definitely-
basically what I'm asking.
Okay. I definitely understand those concerns, Bruce. It's a lot to have a lot of different construction going on at the same time. We would like to move forward with the concrete this fall. We're still figuring out a few internal capacity things because of COVID. But that we kind of wanted to wait for this meeting to happen and see what the discussion is like. But the plan would hopefully be to move forward in about October or so.
And Bruce, just to add to that, I think that it's definitely a point well taken, but I think that in the scheme of the length of the viaduct project, this is a very small implementation timeline relative to that. And so while it might be challenging in the short term, I think that the benefits that it would have would really outweigh that sort of shorter term challenge. Because these kinds of projects are really only typically Carissa can say better, but I would say between 4 to 6 weeks, maybe a little more.
Okay.
I'll chip in. I think you could probably safely say in a few months this would be finished.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Steve Simon? Oh,
Yeah,
wait, sorry. Steve,
Okay.
I keep doing that to you, but then I get committee members who want to talk. Angel, you had something.
Sure, yeah. So I am new to the committee. And so if you could give me just a quick 2-sentence summary of what the viaduct project is. I live in the neighborhood and I've seen construction. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. So just wanted to get a little bit of historical piece there. And then 2, if you could just summarize really quickly, I guess, what is the main difference between what was proposed and what is now? And what, I guess, the new proposal, what issue does that new proposal seem to try to solve?
Sure. So the viaduct project, if you can see my screen right now, along Riverside Drive West, the structure that this road sits on is was kind of in disrepair, needed to be fixed. And so it's what I think Deborah was saying, it's about a 5-year process to kind of restructure that, and it's being done in phases. But they're redoing the structure that the road is on, if that makes sense.
Yep, that's clear.
Okay. And then, so we presented this section last time, or the whole section, and actually it might be helpful to go to
I think
this slide.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what we proposed last time. So if you look at these 2 cross sections, so existing, it's 2-way. You can go north and south, and there's parking along the west curb. And then we had proposed keeping the parking along the west curb and adding parking along the east. But because it's about 30 feet, there were concerns about the bus not being able to get by if someone was double parked to, like UPS or FedEx was dropping off, or if someone was getting picked up or dropped off in a taxi or Uber or something. And so, yeah, so we are now coming back to say we can still keep the parking along the west curb. We can extend it a bit to allow for more space. We're also proposing 2 no standing zones along the west curb to allow for people like UPS and FedEx or people picking up and dropping off to pull in and make those deliveries, but also allow a few sections where we can add some additional parking to alleviate the parking that was displaced by the viaduct work.
Great. Thank you for clarifying. I think for
Yeah.
me, I wasn't connecting like the UPS, FedEx type trucks needing a space to stop by. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Angel. Steve, Simon, finally. This time I'm not going to cut you off. And I have to believe Maria Luna wants to say something after you.
Oh, my God. Okay, thank you for putting me before Maria. But by the way, Angel, I think the point of having that no standing area is not just for FedEx and UPS. It's for taxi drivers, anybody who's dropping people off along that stretch. But I have 3 questions. The first is, I think it might be helpful if you actually provided the stats on the north and southbound traffic along this section. I was thinking that it might make more sense if it's going to be one way for it to go northbound. But you're saying that doesn't make sense at all?
We collected traffic volumes last year. And the northbound movement is significantly lower than the southbound,
Right.
both
But
in the
see-
AM and the PM.
But if you don't have those statistics with you, could you provide them to us afterwards?
They're in a slide.
Yeah.
It's on the
So we
slide.
have traffic volumes here. And then we also have an appendix slide that I can show you as well that includes the whole
Okay.
project.
Okay, well, I can't read them on my phone. Okay.
Yeah, this will be available tomorrow on the DOT website.
Okay. All right. So question number 2, the parking that would be provided on the east side, is that parallel parking or
Yes,
it would be parallel?
yes.
Because, we have guardrails right along that whole stretch of the park. So but people on the passenger side of those vehicles wouldn't, they're coming. Where are they coming? They're coming from
Yeah,
the
so
other
if you look at,
So the people on the driver's side are not going to be able to get out of their cars.
so during the last discussion, we were asked to widen the parking lane along the west curb. So we could actually reduce this to the standard, which is 8, and that would give 3 more feet to the parking space along the east so that there's more space to open the car doors.
All right, so you'd paint some kind of a line there to indicate that
Yeah.
people should not park within 3 feet of the what we call the embankment?
Yes, we would add the parking lines as you see
Okay.
here.
Okay, well, I think that's the only way that could work. Okay. And
Be mindful of your 3 minutes.
okay, and my last question is it possible that we could consider this to be like a pilot project for the duration of the viaduct project, and then reevaluate it at that point to see whether or not it works and should remain in place?
Are you referring to just the conversion or the entire project?
No, the conversion.
Okay.
I think the answer is we don't have to consider it a pilot project. I think in 4 years, you're welcome to come back to us and we'll be happy to reevaluate. And we will be doing analysis as the months and years go by on our own anyhow. So we'd be happy to continue to work with you.
Yeah, and you don't have to wait 4 years. Okay.
Oh, okay, very good. All right, thank you. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you, Steve. Maria, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I have a lot to say, my dear. I'm sorry. 1 minute is not going to do it. 2 minutes is not going to do it. And I am trying to stay as cool as I can about the testimony that I have heard from Ms. Liz Strand and few of the members of this committee. So if you allow me, I'll start talking. And I am going to begin with the statistics provided for the accidents happening from 2014 to 20, whatever it is. Can you go back to that, screen? All right, so from 1214 to 1218, in 5 years, there was a total injuries of 40 people, of which severe injuries is 3, fatality 0, and KSC, God only knows, the Kremlin system is 3. Now, the bicycles, 1 in 5 years, motor vehicles occupant 35, severe injuries 3, 0, and 3 on the other side. I just want to point out the average of accidents happening. I don't want no one injury to happen in this area, but I just want to point out to all the members of that the figures that they are providing about all these accidents that they complain having in my area. Okay, I just want to lay that out. Now let's move out to the curve going from 158th Street through 164th Street. Can we go back to that screen, please?
This one?
Now, yes. One of the questions that Steve Simon just asked is about the width of the area from west to west and east on that curve. And he also pointed out right now that there is a wooden structure to keep safety in that area. If you know, the area is racks. When it rains and it pours, racks come down to that particular area and blocks traffic. Those are racks. And the trees, what are you going to do about the trees? Are we going to lose trees along the way to accommodate the number 6 bus to go through without interference with the UPS and the Federal Express? Now, we all know that the commercial strip on the lower Manhattan, the commercial area, the traffic there is commercial only. This particular is residential. We don't have deliveries of UPS or Federal Express from about maybe 7, unless there's something emergency, until the following morning. So I don't know what's blocking this traffic is about Federal Express. I know that this plan is to provide parking, additional parking to the fancy people who have moved and purchased apartments in this area, millions of dollar apartments, and you see the literature that they providing to the people to come to our area, you will find a lot of parking. There's not a lot of parkings. You to accommodate rich people coming into our area at the benefit of them and the negative of the people who live in by west side of the area, which is where I live. Now, I saw some pictures of some walking things that you did with some people in the community. The only person that I can identify is Vivian Ducat and Bruce Robertson in those pictures. No one along 19, 835, 825, 839, 845, 853, 867, 863, 869, along to all the way to the corner, the red building, where the famous bus that you want to facilitate the transportation, where they made the turn, and it took us a lot of time to get them to have a stop there to accommodate the people who come from the upper drive to take the bus number 6 there. All right. So now you are going to block, I'm sure, some of the area where the people, where the steps are, to accommodate the fancy angular parking that you intend to do. Not only are you messing up with the area, with our area, the beauty of our area, to accommodate parking for rich people that are coming to our area. And I hope that all the elected officials that took a copy of this resolution or this proposal really took very seriously my complaints and the complaints of our area. I saw something saying that they put flyers around here. I haven't seen a flyer. The only flyer that we see around here is the Chinese food that is delivered or the Domino pizza. Nothing was put in any of the buildings that I will be affected by changing parking in our area, on my area. I'm a district leader. I'm also responsible for the well-being of the people who reside on this particular thing. Now, let me
Maria,
I'm gonna make it, let it please.
kind of bring it
Just
home.
allow me. I'm gonna just make it quick, okay? Because I can
Thank
also
you.
I can also speak very fast. But with my accent, I want to make sure that people such as Mr. Vasquez that doesn't realize the impact that something like this is going to have in our community and his community if he said that he lives in this area. Now, let me go back now to the area where if I'm coming from downtown, I come from the 158th Street, from the Henry Hudson Parkway. I go all the way up to Broadway, to Morgan Place and 158th Street, I mean, Riverside Drive, the fancy area that we have around here. And then I go around the 801, 807 area, 765, 779 to go around the block, to go around to the block, and then stop on the light in the corner. It takes more than 3 minutes. Take more than 3 minutes to get there. All right. Now, just you are blocking the area because of the construction of the viaduct. And then you have all the buses, your buses, stop 3 and 4, one behind the other, waiting for their time to start and go back to the Bronx to accommodate the people who go to maybe Yankee Stadium. It takes more than 3 minutes. And if I come in a taxi, it's going to add me to about $2 or $3, $4 more from my pocket that I cannot afford. Now, let me go back to by where Steve Simon live, 765 in the corner. You have to wait for the light. And then you come back to the viaduct and go all the way up to the corner in order for me to come to my building, which is on 839 Riverside Drive. It takes more than 3 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
Don't say
Maria?
that we are full. Wait a second.
Wrap it up.
Taking
Wrap it up.
advantage of this.
You can do it.
We understand that everybody wants to talk. We want everybody to hear each other
Well, I
as
have
well.
a right to talk because normally I'm a
we know, Maria, can I talk, please? Maria, you had more than 3 minutes already. We listened. It's not that we don't want you to
But you
talk.
didn't listen the last time that I
Wait,
spoke.
we
also.
did, actually, we did. Actually, we did, because I take the minutes also. So we did listen to what you were saying. So what I'm trying to say is, if we want to respect everybody else who has their time and their 3 minutes, we also have to abide by those 3-minute rules as well. And if you have something else to say, after everyone's done speaking, you may come back at the end and get another 3 minutes. And then after that, if there's nothing else to say, then there's nothing else to say at that point. But the 3 minutes, we have to stay within those confines, because everyone gets allotted those 3 minutes and we're listening. But this is the way, this is the rules. We have to follow them. Okay.
Well,
I just want to make sure that everybody understands that. So when the next person speaks as well, doesn't take as much time thinking, hey, I thought it was 3 minutes, but somebody else took 10. So I should get 10 as well. No, it should be 3. Let's stay concise with what we want to say as well. That's what I'm trying to say right now.
Deborah or Roman? Okay.
So
that's my other question. I hope that you come back to me.
So,
okay?
all right. Thanks, Maria. Let me just.
By the way, we are now having, sorry to interrupt, we're now having a discussion. It's only 2 minutes. It's only for questioning of a speaker that is 3 minutes, but this sounds like a discussion, and for discussion, we have 2 minutes. Thank you.
I'm going to move to the attendee side now. And Mr. Lee, you're up.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
All right, great. So I'll try to make it brief. Thank you. So I live at 835 Riverside, which is directly in the path of this, and I've been here for about 10 years plus. So a couple of things, I'll just rattle them off really quickly. Number one, thank you for this consideration, and I do agree there are some issues with the traffic flow. Number two, one of my main concerns is the impact to emergency vehicles going in the uptown direction. So if you're going to cab, it's one thing, fire, police, ambulance, and we do get quite a bit of that traffic, especially in the evenings. I'm just concerned about the extra time that would take. So I'm just gonna, so that's point number two. Point number three, this has been mentioned, but I am concerned about the parking on the hill side because the driver's side door, et cetera. I know you can widen the lane, but I am concerned just about the overall width of the travel lane for the bus, et cetera. It just all seems very tight. The next point I wanted to ask was, when the viaduct work is complete, we'll get all that parking back. So then I don't understand why we would need to increase net parking overall in the neighborhood. That's a smaller point. And then just my final 2 points, even with loading zones, my observation is people tend to park wherever it's convenient. And I am concerned about just sort of backlogs of traffic where people just decide to stop. I saw this happen on the Upper Drive just this evening. There was a backlog of 3 cars because someone just decided to stop and unload someone. And there was traffic going out almost to the intersection. So I like the idea of the no standing zone, but I just wonder, how would that be enforced? I mean, could we get some sort of improved enforcement of that, of the traffic flow? And then number 5, my final comment is, I appreciate all the effort that's gone in here, but given my greatest concern is perhaps that of access of emergency vehicles and timing. I just wonder, could we mark off the parking lane and begin this by simply blocking off the traffic uptown, not adding parking, and just converting Riverside, this stretch, to downtown only, so that we can see what the initial impact is before we start adding parked cars and going on with the other items. Thank you.
Those were all very great comments. I'm not sure.
Debbie, are you looking for us to respond to these as we go?
Um,
I know there were a
mean-
number of comments and questions from Maria that we didn't respond to, so I'm just not sure how you want to have us respond.
Yeah, let's do our best. I mean, we're trying to keep to 3 minutes for the ask and answered. I know I lost the thread there. So, but let's go back to it. So why don't you just, go through as much of Mr. Lee's questions at this time as you can.
I think the quick answers, and I'll let Carissa respond or elaborate if needed. We did review this as we do with all of our plans like this with FDNY. Understand your concerns with that has gone through them. We have spoken with them about the proposal. And also just reiterating that parking is one of the benefits. The other is the intersection at 158th, where we really heard a lot of concerns at our walkthrough and just generally over the past 2 years about safety and comfort at that location. And I think not adding in parking is something we can certainly look at as an option, as a phasing option, and get back to you on that.
Thank you.
And weren't you also going to respond to Maria Luna's points?
There were many. I think it would be helpful to have specific questions or comments. I have some notes here, but in general, I think we hear the concerns about the detour. Some of the other things I'm not sure, impacts on trees. I think that this isn't really changing that aspect. I'm not sure if we can maybe come back if she speaks again and wants to have some very clear questions that we can answer, I'd be happy to respond to them. But in general, we hear the concerns about the diversion, but we do still feel that there is, we're responding to community concerns here at that intersection and community requests for parking at this time.
Paul D.
Hi.
Hi.
I live on Riverside Drive in the area in question, and Mr. Lee, who is a neighbor of mine, covered many of the topics that I had concerns with. To add to that would be the concrete barrier that would be blocking the northern access to that portion of the drive. Initially, I mean, I almost see that as a safety hazard where people who aren't accustomed to this change are going to drive right up and on it. I've seen trucks knock over the stoplight that's in the island that exists there now and drag it halfway up Riverside Drive. So I think, you know, in addition to the concrete walkway area that you're adding, there should be some sort of abutment or some sort of way of keeping people who are unfamiliar with this new traffic pattern from driving right up and hitting pedestrians who might be waiting in that area. Number two, if you look to the northern section of Riverside Drive where there's parking on both sides of the street, I've observed this area with an eagle-eye view of the street for over 10 years now. And just to be honest with you, people are going to stop where it's convenient, regardless of these loading zones, which are going to just basically turn into free parking. People will abuse that, I have to say. But if they stop in the area where there's only one lane of traffic between two parked cars to decide that's going to be the fastest and easiest way, you will have a buildup of several cars and a lot of noise pollution within moments of that occurring. And people just won't move their car because they want to unpack their groceries where they want to unpack their groceries, even if it's just a quick Uber ride, pickup or drop off. So anywhere where you have double parking on this avenue, it's going to just cause that back up immediately as soon as somebody pulls up to where they want to pull up, regardless of loading zones. So those are big concerns. There's a lot of noise with honking horns. And anytime you can't have access to get around a car that's double parked, it's going to cause an immediate backup. And I just see the additional parking as unnecessary if we're looking to create a greener city, attracting more cars to the area. I think is counterintuitive to an idea of having a greener city down the road, especially if we're getting back the 100 and some odd parking spaces once the viaduct is completed. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
I just want to point out, in case it's not clear, because it's hard to see in this graphic, that while there are the two NSA locations, there's also several other spots where people could pull over. I still understand what you're saying. I'm just making sure that that's clear. So up where the hydrants are and where the crosswalks are. So there are not just two places where people could pull over.
Right. My concern is a bit further north where there's parking on both sides. People will, regardless of being anybody's, being conscious of anybody else's concerns, will literally just stop in the middle of the road and take as much time as they want with no other way of cars getting around those double parked cars. Even though there's further down the street, the open areas and those loading zones provided very thoughtfully. I just noticed the habits of what happens in this neighborhood, and people stop where they want to stop and they don't really care who beeps and for how long. And it gets very noisy very quickly.
So when that happens now, people are driving to get around them. They're driving into the other lane of traffic, against traffic?
Yes, and sometimes there's a little bit of a, I was here first approach to who goes past, but it usually works itself out as long as there's room for cars to maneuver. On the upper level, there's one way and it's only one lane, but they have the sidewalk, which people utilize. If it's a UPS truck, they pull themselves up onto the curb, which allows free flow of traffic. Or if somebody decides to park in the middle of the road, people will drive up onto the sidewalk and go and have an opportunity to go around them. Yes, it's not legal, but they do it and it seems to work. So anywhere there's going to be a bottleneck of one lane only, you're going to have people stopping and disregarding other people's timely egress and egress of this area.
All right. That is our time for this particular back and forth. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Kimberly and Carissa. Ira Gershenhorn. Sorry, let me make sure you can talk. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, just speak up a little bit.
Okay. First, let's see, Steve. Yeah, you're creating parking spots when the general trend is to reduce them. I guess other speakers have addressed taking away the parking spots when the construction is completed. Does anyone go 25 miles per hour there now? And what's to prevent someone from going 40 miles per hour? And why can't you reduce the travel lane to 10 feet? And Lawrence Lee had great comments about, because if someone is parallel parking, the travel lane is blocked. So that means no bus, no taxi, no emergency vehicles, just a backup. And backups lead to honking. And of course, if you want the other people to get through, they can't. So I have a no standing zone near my apartment, and it's always used for free parking. So
Okay, I can answer a few of those comments. So the travel lane is typically 11 feet when there is a bus along that corridor. So we'd like to keep that at 11 feet if possible. And I just want to point out that I think Kim mentioned this before, that we heard so many comments about how unsafe the intersection of 158th Street felt from a pedestrian perspective, as well as a motor vehicle perspective when you're driving through there. And so that's what made us look at converting this street from two-way to one-way. And that would get us the benefit of the large concrete curb extension, which gives so many pedestrian benefits. And the reason we've been looking at the parking along the eastern curb is because we had also heard from a number of people in the area that they wanted additional parking because the viaduct project is so long. And so that's what we're trying to do, is accommodate that with these spot parking measures. But if it seems like it's a big concern. So maybe that's something we can discuss more, if that's a phased approach, like I think Steve Simon mentioned, or if we don't do the parking at all.
Bruce, is it okay to come back to you after I just work through the last of the,
Yes, I actually just have a quick question from what Carissa just said, which is Maria made a comment about the people who are involved in the feedback for this project over a year and a half ago. And Carissa, you said you polled other people in the neighborhood. Do you feel there was a representative sample of others besides just Vivian and I? Thank you.
Yeah, so our street ambassadors team was out 2 days, I believe it was, a weekday and a weekend last summer. And they spoke to, I believe it was close to 100 residents and people who work in the neighborhood during that survey period. And based on the survey data, it seems like it's well representative of the neighborhood based on the census data. I can look back at the survey to see if there was more comments about additional parking, but the one question we had asked was, would you support making a two-way street one-way if it could add parking and increase intersection safety? And that was a yes. But I can look more detailed at that survey to see if there was more specifics about the parking, if that's what you're getting at, Bruce.
I'm just getting at the question in general because we want to be representative of the community that's
definitely
next door to Maria and her block, not just people around the corner who are not going to be as directly impacted as she is.
Definitely.
Diego Alexis is next. Diego, you still?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm here. Sorry. My name is actually Christy Maya. I'm a resident of the River Arts Building at 15900 Riverside Drive West. And my apartment actually faces the back side. So my apartment faces the street that's in question about adding the parking and the one-way road. So I would also like to say that I own a car and I pay for a parking spot because of what's going on with the parking situation. So I'm speaking both as a resident of the area and as a driver. who drives in this area. So as a driver in this area, I can tell you that if you make this street a one-way street, my grave concern is that the upper portion of Riverside Drive, which is a very, very narrow street, will become an obscenely crazy mess because people will use that to go from southbound to northbound to get to Riverside Drive and the hospital and all that way. And that's one of my biggest concerns. And that's a extremely populated residential area. The street's very narrow. People tend to park on the sidewalk itself if they need to pull over. And that's my first comment. My second comment is I want to echo the other residents that have spoken on here. I think Mr. Lee was one of them that talk about how people will just pull over anywhere they want, not necessarily the space that you're providing for them. And that's absolutely true. I mean, like I said, as a driver driving this area, I can tell you that not only the street Riverside Drive is, I think when I drive that way in the morning during like rush hour traffic, I can tell you there's about 3 or 4 cars double parked on the westbound side of that street every single morning. And they are not FedEx and they are not UPS drivers. They are everyday common people that are unloading their groceries, that are loading their children in to go to school, or they are, you know, the elderly that are being picked up to go to doctor's appointments. And they are parked right in front of, you know, the big apartment building complexes that are right there. And my third and last comment is this. There is talks and plans of a high rise going on that street. That is, I think it's towards the north end of that block. And so this will completely change the face of this block. So I think that also needs to be put into consideration because it looks like it might be happening, which is a detriment to this community in general, that a high rise is being put on a very low residential block, but that's not the place for this conversation, but that should also be considered. So I just want to go on record that I, as a resident and a driver, I think this is a terrible idea. That's all.
All right, thank you, Kirsty. Thank you for being here. Jerry Culligan, hello. You are unmuted.
Yes. I'm going to echo the point about the building that's about to be constructed or proposed to be constructed. Part of what they are doing is saying that this is a wide street because both parts of Upper and Lower Riverside Drive are considered Riverside Drive. And DOT makes that then a wide street. And if there's construction going on there, it's going to be a total mess. It's at the exact spot where you have the red zone, the upper red zone. The second thing is you talked about the fire, or you checking with the police about the traffic, changing traffic pattern. I would ask you to check with the firehouse, who often makes that turn onto Riverside Drive to head north when they're on calls. The third thing is Upper Riverside Drive is a very narrow street. You indicate on your map as if it can be used as a diversion. All you have to do is take a look at the exiting from the hospital at 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, when that street backs up for 3 blocks because of people trying to go through a 5-car light at 165th Street. And that's an impossible route. And the same thing will happen when we get through COVID and traffic returns to normal on Riverside Drive heading north in emergencies. So I have real questions about you doing this as a permanent thing. And I suggest that Lee's suggestion to try it out as southbound and see what happens, because I think it's going to cause lots of problems that you have not anticipated. That's the end of my comment.
Thanks, Jerry.
I can respond to one quick thing in there. He said we did take it to the FDNY. They have already provided us with approval on the proposal.
All right.
Surprised. I'm surprised.
Do we have, is it Senator Jackson's office? Somebody here from Senator Jackson's office?
My piece.
Hi, this is Dar from Senator Jackson's office.
Hi.
My question was mostly to DOT. Have you guys considered angled parking on one side only as a mitigation between having both sides parking and only one side parking?
So angled parking requires a wider width of the street than we currently have. It would be about 36 feet that we would need, and there's about 30 currently.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
And that's based on which angle? On the 45 or the 30?
That's on the 45.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you. I might come back with a question, but I prefer to yield my time right now.
Okay, it is getting late. We still have a couple more items on the agenda, so I think I'm gonna have to sort of cut us off for a second round of questions, but I still have Jim Berlin.
Yeah, I have two comments. One of them, let me just check my notes, is in your presentation, you said you asked people, what would they think of making a street one way if it increased more traffic? Now, I would imagine you asked, let me just start my own timer. You asked that general question. Now, had you asked the more specific question, would you want that specific street made one way, which for whatever reason you didn't do, you might have gotten, in fact, very different answers. So that's one point. Now, my second point, and this is gonna make your DOT hairs stand up on the back of your head, but on a lightly traveled two-way street, where generally there's no one, there's not that much traffic, the other lane, the opposing lane, is a de facto diversion. So when there's a UPS truck parked in your lane and there's no one coming in the other lane, you go into the other lane and there's a whole other lane. And that's how these streets work. The same thing happens on Audubon Avenue, which is a narrow street with all kinds of double parking. People are careful. They actually drive slowly, can you imagine? And they have to, of course, go into the opposite traffic lane, but that's how it works. So I think that's, and again, this is not orthodox DOT traffic school thinking. You're never supposed to cross that line unless it's an emergency, God forbid. But on real streets here in Washington Heights, on Wadsworth, which is narrow, and Edgecombe, and this street, and Audubon, like I said, this happens all the time. It's the only way these streets work. And ironically, which I know totally infuriates your DOT mentality, the fact that people have to drive slowly and carefully actually limits accidents. And with all these double parked cars cluttering things, you can't go fast. Now, this is the philosophy of congestion actually causing safety, which again is anathema to DOT type people. But and again, there may be some great flaw in what I'm saying, but the reality of this neighborhood, and I've lived here for 77 years, is that's how these narrow two-way streets work. And what you're proposing doesn't have that quality, because the second someone stops, UPS truck, inconsiderate creep, with their basket of laundry, whatever, the whole street stops. And that does not happen with a two-way street, again, because of the reality that we live with up here. Thank you very much.
Just in response to that, I hear what you're saying. I think that that doesn't mean there isn't room to kind of rethink how this behavior happens and how the street can be designed to sort of get around that entering the opposing lane. And also just to reiterate again that it's not the entire, that most of the stretch that's proposed here doesn't have parking on both sides. A lot of the stretch is actually open and allows that kind of passing behavior without any opposing traffic.
Wes, to speak for the first time.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Richard.
I'll try to be brief. I came into tonight's meeting really wanting to hear the discussion and not sure what the right outcomes were. Here are some of my observations from the discussion. From looking at the Q&A, a number of people commented on the negative impact on bicyclists of this project. I haven't heard any consideration or response along those lines in response to those concerns or ways of addressing them. Secondly, as people identify themselves tonight, it seems to be a very substantial number of the people who live in close and who are most impacted by this project who are saying, whoa, this doesn't look like it works well. Third, we were told that the viaduct project is one of the motivating factors for this project. I'd like to suggest that the viaduct project, though it's going to last a while, is not a permanent project and should not be met with a response of this scope. Fourth, the other thing that I've heard most as a motivator here is more parking. That's inconsistent with everything that this community board has done as long as I've been aware of it. I had a car for quite a while. I would have loved more parking, but that hasn't been our approach to problems here. I am a little bit concerned with, more than a little bit concerned with what's said about the pedestrian problems at the southern end of the project. But I think the approach that is being proposed here is sort of the classic metaphor of taking an elephant gun to shoot a fly. And I end up having trouble seeing why this project should move forward at this time, and that there may be some more limited or totally temporary solutions that may be appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
If I can respond, I think on the DOT side, it's helpful. It would be helpful for us to kind of get clarification on whether the concerns are about the conversion or the addition of parking, because as Carissa said, the conversion is really tied into the intersection geometry. And this intersection has been looked at for a long time. And we've tried to come up with sort of more simple solutions that don't require a more dramatic change. And ultimately, to be able to sort of take out one of those legs, it does require something more substantial. But I think we're hearing concerns about this proposal, but it sounds like a lot of that has to do with adding parking and with like constraining the roadway. So I think it would be helpful for us to get an idea if that's like just kind of separate those two concepts a little bit. And then as far as the cyclists, I'm not sure what the I'm not sure where those questions are coming from. Obviously, the 158th Street two-way bike lane runs through this intersection, and we have heard concerns from cyclists about the safety here. So improving the intersection would certainly benefit them. This is shortening the crossings and the sort of the way traffic moves on the side of the street where the lanes are. So if someone wants to speak up and be more specific about what the impact on cyclists is that they're concerned about, that would be helpful as well.
All right. I guess my question to the committee is, we are ready to have an up or down vote on this? And if so, then somebody needs to motion for it. Or
Could I just interrupt, Kimberly? Could you stop sharing your screen so we can see one another, please? Thank you.
so again, we can have an up or down vote tonight, or we don't, nothing is requiring us to move. We can, I mean, I'm open to suggestions. We can go back for sort of more surveying to sort of capture, get at the issue that the questions were asked in sort of generalized and linked ways, and to try to get underneath these two threads here about, and to sort of separate the parking issue from that intersection. But yeah, so that's it. So I guess I would say this is a funky one. Like I'm personally comfortable seeing us keep this one out here, because I feel like, or if somebody feels, if you all think we're ready to go up or down vote, then so be it, and somebody make a motion. Richard Allman, what can you say to us?
I would move that this issue be tabled to the call of the chair.
I second that. The committee still has to vote on whether we want to table it. And there's one other twist I want to throw into it, since I actually have the floor. It's very important, and I understand this because I have great sympathy for DOT. I taught physics, and there are similarities between traffic and electrons, for example. But anyway, you want to reduce from 5 legs to 4 legs, that dangerous intersection. Maybe you can kill another leg and not this one, and keep the street 2-way. Now, I don't know whether that was ever part of your thinking, but that's another little twist we really ought to pursue. Thank you.
All right. So, you know that I am not the person who ever wants to postpone or kick the can. I always want to just say, we've heard enough, let's move on. I feel like there were some really interesting things that came up in this longer discussion as it relates to, you know, whether really, yeah, there's a lot that's interesting things that came up. I think, yeah, I for one would like to have some thought about having some ability to deal with this in the future. I mean, and get feedback in a more detailed way on the places that we need it. Bruce?
Can DOT do a survey of Maria's neighbors on that block just to satisfy their perspective on it all, because it's going to affect them directly? In other words, from 158 to 160.
Well,
Debbie, motion,
yeah.
I want to play Jim's usual role. Motion to table goes directly to a vote.
Okay, so let's do it. Mary? Wait, sorry. Mary, do I need to unmute you?
What are we voting on, please?
A motion to table.
We're voting to table it or not. And then we can talk about it next time, because there are too many things to think about tonight.
Thank you.
Sorry, can somebody, Mary?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, so I vote yes.
Okay. Omar?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Angel?
Yes.
Mariella?
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and I'll vote yes. Have I missed anybody? Is Robin with us? Edith?
Rod Dingle votes no.
All right. So, sorry.
No?
Gerard said no.
Oh my God. Yeah, Gerard, I'm sorry.
How you doing, Deb? Hi.
Sorry, just one more time. Hi.
I vote no, thank you.
Okay. All right. All right, with that, the motion to table has passed. Thank you to the DOT team. We're gonna-
Debbie, can I jump in? I know that at the beginning of this, you mentioned St. Nicholas 165 to 170. If Chris and I would normally step off, but we're also heavily involved in that project, and I want to know if we can help in any way before we go.
Yeah, before you go, if you could just say, did the is that implementation done, or is it not quite started? I just wasn't that aware of the dates, but I knew it was happening.
It started on August 18th and it's still ongoing. We still have to do some of the painted pedestrian spaces and paint the bike lanes and add some of the delineators for the pet spaces.
And do you remember how many total parking spaces at the end of the day that created? Is that like 18?
Yeah, it's close. I should know this number off the top of my head. Yeah, it's like 18 to 20.
Okay, all right.
I can get you the number though.
No, thank you for that. And then I will follow up with Lyle about our street lamps issue, but thank you for that because I would have forgotten about it. Thank you guys, and we will talk about sort of next steps here.
Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, thanks everybody. Chanel, are you still with us? Carol Antunez was needing to get promoted.
I'm here. Hi, how are you?
Oh, you are up. You are
Yeah.
up. Okay, great. I am just going to give the floor to you.
Great. Thank you so much for giving us the time today. I'm here today with our CEO, Frank Reig. We're gonna try to go through our presentation fairly quickly just so we can open up the floor for questions. We do have a hard stop at 9. We had to shuffle some things around, but really happy to delve in now. So I'm just gonna share my screen.
Carol, real quickly, what's your role with Revel?
Sorry, yeah, I am the community affairs manager at Revel.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have the ability to share my screen now, so I'm going to do that. Okay, great.
Perfect. Thanks, Carol. Hi, everybody. Like she mentioned, Frank Reig here, CEO and co-founder of Revel. Just thanks for taking the time here. I'm going to try and go through this pretty quickly because I'd imagine there's going to be questions and it's already getting pretty late. Just for some quick background, I'm a native New Yorker, born and raised here. Spent the first 18 years of my life on Staten Island. I've spent the last close to 20 in Brooklyn. And I started Revel mostly because I was kind of fed up with trying to get around this city. Especially when you live in the outer boroughs like I did in Brooklyn, every subway is basically built to do one thing, to get you into Manhattan. But if you want to do any other trip, sort of good luck. So that was really the genesis of Revel back in 2018. We did a small pilot of close to 100 vehicles in the summer of 2018. We then expanded to a considerable area in Brooklyn and Queens in 2019 with over 1,000 vehicles. And earlier this year, in March, we expanded throughout Manhattan and the South Bronx during sort of the height of COVID, where we worked with Corey Johnson, the speaker, the DOT, to basically offer free rides to healthcare workers. So just for some background there, the fleet now is about 3,000 vehicles. We've done about 12 million miles in New York City as a system. And I'm sure some of you saw the, oh, Carol, I'm just giving some background here. You don't have to go through the slides. I've done about 12 million miles in the city right now, and I'm sure many of you saw sort of the press. In a short period of time, we had several serious crashes. That required us to, let's suspend our service right now. Let's take a step back. Let's regroup. Let's reset. Think about certain safety enhancements, safety features. And we worked with City Hall, worked with NYPD, worked with elected officials, worked with the DOT commissioner to get sign off for our relaunch about 3 weeks ago. So Carol, maybe start at the first slide. I just wanted to give sort of a little bit of background here. So I'm sure folks have seen Revel, street legal vehicle with a license plate, rides and parks in the street, fully electric, I think one of the great things as well, especially any community that cherishes parking spaces, parks 90 degrees to the curb, you know, doesn't take up too much space in the community. Next slide, Carol. From day one, from 2018, when I launched this company, bootstrapped it, never used gig economy, never will. Don't even want to touch it. So every mechanic, every battery swapper that you see out in the field, every field tech, every customer support agent, they literally have the same health insurance that I do as CEO. Sorry about that. I also live across the street from a fire station. Next slide, Carol. Something else we've had since 2018 is an access program. So we have over 2,500 folks signed up for that. It's basically about $200,000 that we've basically given the community because they get 40% off every single ride. So anyone on local, state, or federal public assistance, so that could be Medicaid, that could be somebody who's in NYCHA housing. We're pretty liberal with that designation. Next slide, Carol. This just kind of shows you, you know, graphically sort of the growth. May of 2019, that was basically the end of our year-long pilot from 2018, sort of expanded throughout Brooklyn and Queens, over 1,000 mopeds. And then here we are, call it June 2020, or even as of today, September 14th, really expanded throughout Manhattan, throughout the Bronx, and even more Brooklyn and Queens. As I mentioned, about 12 million miles now and close to 4 million rides. This goes back to what I was mentioning before, working with Corey Johnson, the speaker, working with the DOT, coming into Manhattan and the Bronx. That was sort of at the height of COVID, free rides for all healthcare workers. Next slide here, Carol. This sort of gets into the meat here of, as we worked with Commissioner Trottenberg, as we worked with the mayor's office, as we worked with NYPD, we had two issues. And I think one of the things that happened was, you know, coming out of COVID, call it from April through July, we signed up over 200,000 new users in New York City to bring our total to over 350,000 users. But I think hundreds of thousands of people in a very short period of time were looking for a way to get around the city that was safe, way to social distance while getting around, and frankly, just had a lot of fun, especially maybe after being cooped up in their apartment for 10, 12 weeks. Two things we noticed though. One of them was we've been operating this city for over 2 years, and starting in May, the amount of folks not wearing a helmet increased significantly. So sort of helmet compliance was an issue. So what we did was, over the last month, as we worked with the DOT and City Hall, every single time you ride now, and you'll see it out in the street if you see someone renting a Revel, when you hit start ride now, it used to just turn on. You're supposed to open up the helmet case, put a helmet on, and you're off. Problem was not enough people were putting the helmet on. A lot of people weren't putting the helmet on. So now every single time you ride, when you hit start ride, the helmet case opens, the moped does not turn on. You then have to put the helmet on. You then have to take a selfie, prove it to us that you're wearing that helmet. We check every single picture. And then you're able to turn that vehicle on. So basically totally separating helmet use from turning on the vehicle. And just from what I've seen, talking to DOT the last 3 weeks in our relaunch, my employees, myself, the amount of helmet usage has exponentially increased, which is exactly what we wanted to see. If there's a passenger, you also have to take a second selfie. And if for some reason you think it's funny to take a picture of your foot or not wearing a helmet, guess what? You're suspended. So I'd recommend not doing that. And I think people are realizing that we do take it seriously and we check every single photo. Next slide here, Carol. And then outside of helmet use, the other thing that we realized, and one of the reasons why I'm at this community board meeting today, is certain neighborhoods like Inwood, for whatever reason, from May through July, there was an increase in rider behavior that was unacceptable. I saw it, communities saw it, and we need to attack that head on. So what we ended up doing was working with DOT. We basically developed a safety training. So all 360,000 users, when we relaunched 3 weeks ago, they were not allowed to ride again until they took the safety training. So it's 42 questions long. It's pretty significant. You're talking 15, 20 minutes. You also have to watch a tutorial video, which is another couple of minutes. And the safety training goes into all the things you need to realize. This is not an e-bike. This is not a regular bike. Not that you should be running red lights on an e-bike or a regular bike either, but that's a whole nother story. But this is a motor vehicle. It needs to be treated with a certain amount of respect, and you need to understand the rules. So really making people go deep into that safety training, 42 questions, understand the vehicle they're getting on. And I think that's done a really good job the last 3 weeks since we've relaunched our fleet of 3,000 vehicles. I think the amount of rider behavior that I would say is unacceptable. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it has decreased in a really good way, which is exactly what we needed to see with the relaunch. Some other safety initiatives that we built over the last month that we had shut ourselves down and worked with DOT with: increased lessons capacity. We now have lessons in 4 boroughs, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Bronx, Queens. Used to just be at our headquarters in Brooklyn. So that's a lesson you could book right through the app, 7 days a week, 8 hours a day. These things are staffed. So we're giving a lot of lessons every day, which is great. Something else that we've done is, I'll talk about community reporting on the next tool because I don't think it's here, but also automatic alerts. So my team of data scientists and engineers on the back end, with this relaunch now, we took data from New York City DOT on every single one-way street. And we've built the infrastructure around those alerts. So since we have a GPS in every vehicle and we have the back end data from DOT on every one-way street, we've been able to marry those two. So if you think it's the right thing to do to ride down a one-way street the opposite way for 3 or 4 blocks, guess what? Now we know exactly what happened and it's all automated and you're suspended. So we've taken a pretty cutthroat approach to that. So it's one-way streets and also green space. So I know parks in Inwood were an issue back in June and July.
Yes.
With this relaunch, anyone going to a park now is just suspended, will not be using Revel. So all of that is automated now. There's no manual review. We know the GPS. We know where the parks are. We know where the one-way streets are. And we've suspended a lot of users, and I'm okay with it. Because if you can't ride this vehicle the right way, we don't want you riding, and I'm sure this community board doesn't want you riding either. There's a bunch of other things too, but just for time, Carol, next slide. And then in-app community reporting tool, I think it's important for this group just to know that that exists. We get probably several dozen a day, if not even maybe 100 a day, of just reports from the community. It could be a bad parking job, and you don't need to be a registered user. You don't need to have paid us a sign-up fee. All you need to do is download the app. You can also do it through our website if you don't have a smartphone or you want to use a computer or a desktop. You don't need to be a user though. You have access to that community reporting tool, the ability to upload a picture, let us know the license plate if you have it. If not, that's fine. Just tell us the time, the date, the address, what you saw, and we take a lot of action that way as well. Any sort of reckless behavior, things that are going on. And probably another thing that's relevant for this group as well is with this relaunch, with the sort of sign off from DOT and City Hall, we are shutting the service down between midnight and 5 a.m. So that's been the case the last 3 weeks during this relaunch. So you can't rent a Revel during those times. I think that might be it, Carol, unless I'm missing something. Okay, so I will pause there and happy to take any questions. And sorry about the noise in the background here.
Thank you for that. I'm just looking through. We're going to start with Gerard Dingle.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to note my 2 minutes because I don't want to go over. Good evening. I had a couple questions for Revel. And Steve Simon, are you still on the call? Steve? Well, I was hoping Steve would be on because some of my questions relate to that possibly Steve's committee should have been or should be part of monitoring the Revel experience. My thoughts are the helmet exposure. Glad to hear that Revel requires you to use their helmet. But I look at this Revel as a super COVID spreader. What's the mitigation? We've heaped tremendous restrictions on our businesses throughout Washington Heights and Inwood. We have tremendous restrictions for them to clean, disinfect before, during, and after people sit at their restaurants with social distancing. We have literally people getting on COVID spreaders like Revel, putting helmets on. There's issues of when is it being cleaned, when is it being disinfected, and other things that go along with health issues related to sharing a helmet. There's all other kinds of things that should be considered. The touch surfaces are not being cleaned and disinfected like it's required to be in other areas. Liability limits. Revel was a scourge in our community in Inwood. I'm glad, Frank, that you noted all summer the things that were happening, but it took deaths for Revel to finally do something. But you knew all summer long that it was tormenting communities like Inwood, Washington Heights. We were being chased down blocks and streets, sidewalks. by people on Revel, but I'm glad you finally did something about it. And suspensions, at what point is someone banned after they keep doing things on Revel? So those are a couple of questions. I'm very interested to hear about the COVID concerns that I'm addressing. But they're in place in every business except Revel. So what's happening?
So, I mean, just to give you an idea, when we expanded with free rides for healthcare workers back in March, over 3,000 doctors and nurses signed up for that program because they realized it's a lot safer, social distance, you're alone on a vehicle, riding somewhere than it is a bus or a subway or any place else where you're going to be with other folks. So I think in terms of being a COVID spreader, I'm going to have to politely disagree a bit. In terms of the helmet use, every single time we battery swap a vehicle, which in Manhattan is literally every single day because the demand is so high, they get 10 plus rides a day in Manhattan. So every single day that vehicle is battery swapped. This goes back to, we don't use gig economy, right? Every single employee is trained by me, actually cares about the company, cares about the vehicle. The reason why I bring that up is, as COVID happened, since they're my employees, I'm able to train them and change procedure very quickly. Whereas many other companies can't do that. They're in sort of my space of shared mobility where you don't actually have any touch point with the employee because they're not an employee. So every single time we battery swap, those helmets are cleaned, all the touch points on the vehicle are Lysoled. It's just part of the process of how we run the company. So that vehicle is constantly being cleaned. We also have the ability, if at the end of the day you want your own helmet, that's fine. You can buy one right through the app at cost. I don't make any money off that. You can get it for about 30% of what you would buy at a motorcycle shop or a moped shop. And then of course you can also just use your own helmet if you have one. So I think, you know, nothing is perfect in this world that we're in, but I think, was that a timer for me?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
There's
But
a
you can-
3-minute window.
You can conclude the answer to the questions, Frank.
Can I just tell Gerard that I'm still on the call?
Yeah, and I don't think some of my questions were even really answered, but Steve, maybe you could take that up in health. You know, there's definitely issues of cleanliness. Once when a battery pops out and it's used 10 times, that's not all the time. Someone's riding that 10 times, different people. Once.
Okay,
the
all right,
battery pops-
all right. We're gonna, I think we're gonna have to stop there, but on that back and forth. Sorry, let me just see who's up next.
Sally next.
Yeah, I'm just, okay, so nobody else from TNT? Yeah, okay, Sally.
I think, Deborah, just to the other question that you mentioned around suspensions, every sort of violation has its own suspension policy, and we're very transparent about it now. It's right in the app, it's on our website. You see all the policies. So take helmets, for instance. If you're the person who takes a photo of their foot thinking, oh, Revel's never gonna check this photo, I'm not wearing this helmet, no one's gonna tell me to wear a helmet. Okay, well, we do check that immediately. And then you're suspended for 7 days as a temporary suspension once that happens. We send you an email, we send you an in-app notification, you're suspended. This is why, it's for 7 days. If for whatever reason you think it's a good idea to do that again the next time you ride, you are forever banned from Revel. You will not ride ever again, right? So that's just an example of like one suspension policy that we have for a violation. And you know, for things like riding up a one-way street for 5 or 6 blocks, there is no warning. You decided to go up 6 blocks one way the wrong way, you're just gone forever. So Gerard, it depends on the violation. Sometimes they're temporary, sometimes it's a warning, sometimes it's permanent off the bat.
Can you just, Frank, for the record and the recording, can you just, what's the URL so people can review that if they're interested? The violation.
Yep. Carol, do you have it? Or maybe you can message everybody.
Or just, or like, yeah, type it in and we'll.
Our website is gorevel.com. If you go to gorevel.com, it kind of brings you to everything.
Great. Sally?
Sally, unmute. Unmute, Sally.
Sorry, do I need to? Wait, we're gonna come right back to Sally. Natalie?
Okay, I'm unmuted, but
Oh.
Natalie can go first. My questions are really clarification. First, regarding the helmet, is it a smart helmet or could I in fact unlock the helmet, take a picture of me with the helmet on and then put the helmet back?
You could in fact do that, Sally.
Okay, so
what
why
we are-
would you, this is my question. there's a new player on the block, which is Wheels. I don't know if they're in New York yet, but they actually have a smart integrated helmet system that can detect, their sensors can detect whether the helmet is being used and when it's returned. I don't think it's efficient. And they actually, in the write-up on their smart integrated, I can send that to you. I mean, telling someone that they are required to take a picture and that equates to helmet use, it doesn't. Like telling someone to, you know, I just don't understand. I don't understand any technology that's out there that is for a vehicle that wouldn't require helmet use and wouldn't use technology to ensure helmet use. It's like renting cars without seatbelts. It makes no sense. So we've clarified it. It's not smart integrated. It's basically taking a picture. Second, in terms of things like riding the wrong way on a one-way street, going in parks, going on across bridges, etc. That's also a violation which you should have zero tolerance for. I don't know what a suspension would be, but I guess my recommendation would be, guess what? Next time you turn off your bike, it's ride over. You can't turn it on and you're suspended for life. These are
Sally, we're on the same page. Highways, parks, one-way streets. That's it. You're done.
How long are you done for? For life?
Yeah, you're done.
Okay, that's not when these things were communicated in the press after you made these quote unquote changes. That was not what was communicated.
I think the only to
Said
get
was
really
a warning.
to
Okay,
get really
a warning,
specific.
it's not a suspension.
So to get really specific here, something like a highway, done. Like there's no gray area. You're on a highway, like you never ride Revel again. Something like a one-way street, Sally, the way we've set this up, because we're using GPS, that isn't perfect at the end of the day, and everything is automated on the back end. So, I mean, you can read the suspension policy yourself right on the website, but there's a certain mileage where I think it's like 0.1 miles, where I guess you could technically go one block up a one way the wrong way, because there's a margin of error here. I can't be suspending a whole bunch of people when they didn't actually do that. It's the GPS ping, it's Midtown, it's not perfect. So there are mileage markers that we have set up for both park riding and one-way streets, where once you reach a certain mileage, like we have 90% assurity that no, that's not a GPS error, like you're done, right? And it's all in the suspension policy, what those mileage markers are. It's pretty small. It's really just to make sure there's no error with the GPS.
My concern is with the parks. So how long are you done for? Is this suspended for life? Once you can ensure that it was done in a
Sally,
park?
we're at the 3 minutes, so we can't.
The answer, Sally, is yes, you are. You just need to reach a certain mileage marker so that I know it's not actually just error and you're just traveling down Central Park West and it's pinging in the park. So I'm saying just the suspension policy is there. It is very public. It's all laid out. And if you ride in a park and you're just doing donuts and riding around, I can tell you right now, you are suspended for life.
Frank, let me just jump in with Carol, two questions. And I know you guys are turning into pumpkins and you've been with us for a while. How many lifetime suspensions are you up to? And I'm also curious, so when you did the restart and everybody had to do the 42 question quiz and all that stuff, so of the 300,000 people that were on pause when you guys were taking your pause, what percentage of that 300,000 have come back and taken the test?
So a lot haven't, Deborah, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I think we're at 65,000 right now, 70,000 around there. So literally 1/4 of my users have come back. But clearly, I think the last 3 weeks, the reason why our relaunch has been successful is that, it's the right users that have come back, taking this seriously, taking that 42 question safety training, watching the video, taking the helmet selfie. So I think, I've lost a lot of users, but I'm okay with it because we're a better company and a better service for it. So as people come on the platform.
What is your lifetime suspension number at this point?
It's definitely thousands.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Natalie.
Hi. Yeah, thank you, Debbie. Really quickly, when you were introducing your presentation there, you said you made reference to getting a sign off for the relaunch from elected officials. I'd like to know who you were referring to.
So the Department of Transportation, Commissioner Trottenberg, she sent us a letter after quarterbacking with the different agencies, whether it's the Transportation Council of the City Council, the Mayor's Office, and I was on many calls with them over that month, all sorts of elected officials, the Mayor's Office, DOT basically every day. So we basically got a written letter signed by Commissioner Trottenberg saying, we approve of the safety enhancements you're making. We're looking forward to working together, and you're approved to relaunch on the streets of New York. So that's a letter from the Commissioner of the DOT.
So that-
After working with all the different stakeholders.
So I just wanted to clarify, the elected official whose support you got signed off on was the mayor.
So let me put this as there's always politics here, but I'll say the Commissioner of the DOT is not going to sign a letter approving of our relaunch without approvals from certain people.
But just to add to that, we have been working closely with city council members in all 4 boroughs who we consulted. So I guess relevant to this board, Community Board 12, we did speak with Idanis Rodriguez, and we also met with Congressman Espaillat. So they were aware of what our plans were for relaunch.
Thank you. I'm gonna if you'll give us just maybe 8 more minutes. I've got a few people in from the public. I'm actually going to start with Allegra Legrand. Oh, sorry, Allegra, I need to Okay, you can talk now.
Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Okay, super. So I have a few questions. I'm just going to read them off. So if you make a complaint via the Revel app or website, you're not a user, does Revel collect any of your data, and what does it use that data for? My second question, following up from Sally, is why don't you have a camera on Revel that can operate when it's in motion to identify if someone has their helmet on or not? It could also be a double for whether or not Revels are parked on the sidewalk. Third, there was some drag racing of scooters and mopeds. Do you monitor jerk or changes in acceleration to make sure that people are not doing that kind of thing? Third, you mentioned uncertainty with GPS. Do you not also use GSM? Fourth, when someone does a violation going the wrong way up a one-way street, that should have points being put on their driver's license. So are you communicating those violations to DOT? Fifth, why don't you make the training mandatory instead, or having a motorcycle license mandatory? Why is it only optional? And finally, why did you try to set up in a residential zone your training and not in a commercial zone in Park Terrace? Thank you.
I did not have a pen or paper, so you might have to remind me of some of the questions. So let me maybe work back to front. So the first one was around where we set up lessons. Allegra, I think the biggest thing that we look for when we set up lessons is subway access so that people can actually get to the lessons location, and someplace quiet where there's not a lot of traffic, motor vehicle traffic, because clearly we're going to be giving some lessons and you're not going to want a lot of vehicles around, like a commercial district, I think you mentioned. So I know there was some feedback from the community around our lessons location in Inwood. Carol, I think you can speak to that because I think we took that feedback and then immediately changed the location.
So we got the feedback, and within 2 hours, we had shut down the lessons and moved the location. And we actually reached out and tried to coordinate a better location so that we have a new location for Inwood and Washington Heights people, that it's really just like in a very quiet area. There's really no residents on either side. And we were just trying to find the best place that would satisfy the community, but also users. So they're not so far out of the way that they're really, discouraged to take the lesson. Because the point is we want them to go to the lesson. It's an hour. They get some amazing experience on how to ride. And we really want people to take advantage of it. It's totally free and available to the public. And we noticed that as soon as we had lessons available in Inwood, like signups we're incredible. And we want to continue to do lessons.
What's the new location?
Give me 1 second. I'll pull up the exact.
It's near 9th Avenue, right?
It's on.
Let's keep it moving because we're not going to get all Allegra's questions in 3 minutes. So
I think
Frank, can
another
you just sort of run through the drag racing, the GSS motorcycle license?
Sure. I think one I
GSM
remember.
points on your driver's license for moving violations, going wrong way.
I got it, Allegra.
Data
I got it.
disclosure from the app.
So Allegra, just to be clear, this is not an e-bike, right? There's a license plate. Everyone has a driver's license. So if there's any sort of moving violation, there can be traffic enforcement. A police officer can pull them over, give them a ticket, just like they would do anybody else driving any sort of other motor vehicle. And also anyone that goes through a red light camera or things like that, we absolutely bill that person back. They pay that ticket. You know, it's not like they're getting out of that ticket. So these are things we definitely do, and it all goes back to having a license plate, and we're able to track that sort of information. I think also because Revel has contacts at basically every single police department in the city that we operate in. Police officers are basically trained now that we've been operating 3 years, where when they do pull someone over, they actually give us a call and let us know so that we know. So we do suspend users when those police officers call, absolutely.
But you don't pass on information about users going the wrong way to the police or DOT.
No, we don't, but they would be suspended according to our suspension policy. So, you know, they're just not out on the platform anymore.
Okay.
I know,
I think
Jen.
I think you also had a comment around, like, you know, is there another trigger for, you know, like riding recklessly or just like going up and down a block? The answer is absolutely yes, there is. We call it the, you know, sort of just the squiggly line alert, which is basically like when a GPS trail is just makes no sense and it's just going back and forth around a street. That's also an alert on our back end, and they're permanently suspended. So that's something we've implemented and has gone out with this relaunch. So all those folks that cause havoc, they think that's how you ride a vehicle anywhere in this city. Well, they're in for a rude awakening, because when they shut that vehicle off, they never ride again. And I think that's just helped behavior everywhere. Once you get those users off the platform, I think everything has been helped a lot.
Can you just, and then I'm just going to ask if we could connect Allegro perhaps with Carol to pass the remainder of the questions, but just a quick on the other, not the GPS, the other thing. Allegra asked about.
So what was your question around GPS? Sorry.
Ways to triangulate where you are. Can you use, you said GPS. And
Right.
I said, only GPS, why not GSM too? Because inside of a dense city like New York, as you notice, GPS is not the best solution.
I'll be honest with you, Allegra, I don't know what GSM2 is. So I'm just gonna.
GSM? You don't
Okay,
know what cell
okay.
phone
You
triangulation
guys,
is? I
we're
don't
going to
think-
get you connected outside of this because we're
Perfect.
like on double the amount of time for that. I'm going to take Ira Gershenhorn, and I see you, Steve, you have something after Ira and the senator's office.
Hello. Okay, this is softball. I've heard comments that the color of the scooters makes them invisible to other vehicles. Would a day glow color be better? And maybe they're too quiet. That's my only questions.
Well, one of the things about them being quiet, you know, they're pure electric. So I think that's great for the community, right? I think everyone here in this call has experienced a motorcycle or just a loud car. I think there's nothing worse in your community. One thing that the Revel does do is it makes a tick-tock noise when you have the blinker on. So as you're coming into an intersection, anyone that's ridden Revel or seen in a neighborhood, you hear that tick-tock. So it just makes pedestrians aware at intersections that the vehicle is coming. And then the other part of your question, Ira, I'm sorry.
The color of the scooters might be invisible to other vehicles. Would a day glow color, or are you limited by the city and having them black and blue?
So that was feedback that we received actually last year from the Department of Transportation. So we ended up doing was when we increased the fleet this year to 3,000 vehicles, every new vehicle is bright blue. So I don't know if you've seen the two different vehicles, Ira. One is bright blue, one is a little darker.
I've just seen black and blue.
Okay, you'll see one eventually because they're definitely out there. There's probably more of those than the other ones now.
Okay.
So that's the new color scheme now because of feedback, 6-12 months ago.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Dara from Senator Jackson's office.
So hi everybody. Welcome Frank to the community virtually. My question is, we heard feedback from constituents that some people are sharing their accounts. So I'm assuming since you already did that half step of doing a selfie at the beginning of the ride, does it do photo matching to the license? Or is it just the goodwill of the user?
So one thing that we do, and we've fixed a lot of this now, because frankly, as we've gone into new neighborhoods starting in March, you know, account sharing and some fraud issues became an issue that we never experienced in 2018 or 2019. So we took a couple of actions now, both right before we suspend our own service and now going into this relaunch. A few of them are a $1 pre-authorization charge for every single ride. So some companies will do that. It really reduces fraud. And when you talk about payment fraud, you're talking about all sorts of other fraud. So just doing a $1 pre-authorization charge for every single ride, that has helped a lot. Two-factor authentication, we rolled out in July before we suspended our service. That helped tremendously. Two-factor, for those that don't know, is, you know, you sign in with your username and password onto a phone. And then if you're signing in onto a different phone, now we send you an SMS message to your old phone that you originally signed in on. So if you are account sharing, you're giving someone your username and password, you're also going to need to coordinate with that person now an SMS message. So that reduced a lot. And then something that we're using technology for on the back end that's been pretty awesome recently.
Mommy kisses. Let's go to sleep.
Technology in the back end is essentially, you can imagine, okay, you know, I'm Joe, I let, you know, Steve hop on the Revel and I, you know, hit start ride and he goes off. And now his friend who he just let ride on his account drives somewhere, you know, he goes 2 miles, goes to his house or something, parks the Revel, he calls his friend and says, hey, end the ride. His friend ends the ride. Guess what? Now on our back end, we have a phone and a Revel that are 2 miles apart, right? So now all those accounts are being flagged. We then check the helmet selfie with the, you know, so we've gotten a lot of account sharing out that way just in the last couple of weeks. So I think, you know, it's been an iterative process, just everything with Revel, you know, a fleet of 3,000 vehicles in a major city. We've definitely had some learnings this year, but I think account sharing, we've really gotten under control in a good way.
So you don't think that people, let's say siblings, and that's one case that I've heard about, and there are 2 constituents did it, and they got caught for different reasons by the police. Is that 2 siblings, one had a suspended license, the other one didn't. So the one that had a suspended license said, hey, you know what? Let me jump on the Rebel. I can use your license and the phone. And it's a stupid phone that they use, like a cheap one, to just do that. The only reason they got caught is because the police department stopped one of them for a different reason, not for the Rebel. So I'm just bringing it up to you so you're aware of it.
Yep, no, I appreciate it, but you know,
because some of the bad behavior comes from people that are not the legitimate user, but you know how people love sharing stuff.
Yep, and then when those brothers, they end their ride, you know, a mile away from their phone, he's going to be permanently suspended, and that's a shame for both of them. I think one other thing, it's a little more nuanced, but the safety training that we push everybody through now before you ever ride again, because I think there's an element here of not people trying to be bad people. It's not people trying to, you know, there is an element of just maybe culturally mopeds. Oh, that's fine. You know, you can use my account, and they're not trying to be a bad person. They just needed some education. So as part of the safety training now, there's like 4 questions around account sharing, making sure people understand when they go through this training, how serious this is, and how much liability they take on letting someone use their account and God forbid something happens. So I think, you know, all of these are being attacked, whether it's technology, things on the payment side, as well as just straight up education.
Thank
That's
you,
all
Frank.
for me. Thank you.
And just to close us out, Steve, Simon, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, if I might. First of all, I just want to say I'm for the most part very impressed with the attitude that Frank is showing and the seriousness he's taking, and the recognition that he understands that he has problems that he has to address. The second, I want to say that I'm glad to learn that the bikes have been moved from Park Terrace East to Ninth Avenue. I believe that's what I heard. I don't believe it was appropriate for them to be parked right outside Isham Park. In the interest of full disclosure, I should let you know I work for the Parks Department. So it's a problem, I think, to have a commercial outlet parked permanently or on a long-term basis alongside on what's tantamount to Parks property. My question is, how many employees do you have who are checking the selfies and checking the other items that you've been talking about tonight? Checking the distances where people are traveling, whether or not they're going on one-way streets or into parks. It seems to me you need to have a ton of people doing that.
So every single selfie is checked within 15 minutes. So the thinking there is when you take that ride within 15 minutes, we want to make sure you're not able to take a second ride until we review that. We actually just reported all sorts of statistics to the DOT last week, and we had a really good meeting with them about our relaunch. And one of those was exactly around these statistics. And right now, to be specific, 99.7% of helmet selfies are checked within 15 minutes. So basically 100%. So I've been pretty proud of the team, just making sure that we are on top of that at all hours of the day. Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Well, you're not on top of it after midnight.
Well, after midnight, there's no more rides after midnight.
There are no more rides, right? So how many people do you have who are doing this type of work?
Well, it's our customer experience agents. So we have about 50. Because you have to remember too, Steve, we operate in 6 markets. We're in San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, Austin, Miami, Washington, D.C., and in New York City. So that customer experience center does all of the cities, and there's about 50 plus people.
And 50 is enough to do all of this checking?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Debbie.
All right, thanks, Steve. All right, with that, I want to thank Rebel for hanging in with us.
Oh, sorry, Deborah.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead, Frank.
Just to finish, Steve, I appreciate your comment around taking this seriously because, I understand the frustrations this community had from May through July. Because as CEO, I was out battery swapping some nights because I do that. I work with the warehouse guys and gals, and now I'm on the front lines with them because if I'm going to lead this company, I got to know what's going on. And I saw some of the things that were happening in places like Inwood in June and July. And everything that we did for this relaunch was to make sure that it is not like that ever again. So hopefully the last 3 weeks, you've seen a significant difference from June and July as opposed to the last 2 weeks. Because we're going to be here for the long term, and we need to really make sure that we are a net positive for the community. If we're not, what are we doing? So
well, I appreciate that because the situation in the Inwood Parks was absolutely not tenable. And frankly, a lot of us were very happy when you suspended operations, and we're very concerned when you came back fairly quickly. So we are going to be keeping an eye out for how it works. But what was going on in the parks with these vehicles was absolutely not acceptable.
Yep, I hear you, Steve. So please give us feedback. Let us know how things are going, and talk to you all soon.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
And Carol, I'll connect with you.
Absolutely.
Getting people's info. All right. Many thanks. All right.
Okay,
So-
with Gerard's permission, I'm going to have to go on to something else. Thank you all.
Thanks, Steve. So let's just a few minutes on new much as late as it is, we have, so I don't know if everybody had a chance to review a letter that came, that was a letter written from Yeshiva University to Commissioner Trottenberg at the DOT. Signatories to that letter included any number of businesses, again, on Amsterdam or near that corridor. as well as all the elected officials, et cetera, et cetera. I have that scheduled for for being on our agenda next month. However, I wanted to see if we wanted, if we feel like we don't need a lot of time to discuss it, would we want to consider taking another 15 minutes, discussing it, and potentially moving to a resolution for that? And again, we can move it into next month. And if the committee would allow, I would invite at this time John Greenfield from Yeshiva University just to give us like the quick summary on what's in there for those of a chance, and then we can maybe make a decision about if we feel we can push through to a resolution, or if you'd like to give it more due time next month. John, are you still available to talk to us a bit about this? And Chanel, if you're still available, can you promote him? I have unmuted you, John.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Great. And if you can, I can be on camera as well.
Okay, there you go.
All right, great. Again, I want to thank the committee for giving me the opportunity to speak. I just want to make one small point of clarification. Yes, Yeshiva University is one of the leaders on this initiative, but we have been working very closely with our neighbors at the Wheels School on 182nd Street. Interestingly enough, the students have been tremendous leaders in the community, focusing on traffic and eco-friendly beautification measures on 182nd Street, planting beds and the like. So it was actually in conversation originally with Wheels that we noticed that there was somewhat of a consensus to address the alarming traffic issues that we were seeing on Amsterdam. And this, we met with them in July, and by early August, around August 6th, there was a significant crash, we were told, is attributed to drag racing that occurs between 190th and roughly 185th Street. About 3 in the morning, a vehicle spun out at 187th Street on Amsterdam, crashed into the scaffolding at our boys' high school. The car burst into flames, took out a significant portion of scaffolding. NYPD, FDNY, all they responded. We were alarmed by that. It's not only, of course, our boys' high school is there. We also have our late night bus shuttle that runs till about 2 a.m. to our Midtown campus, right there on 187th on the opposite side of the street. So thankfully, our students were not on site at that time because frankly, it could have been a much more significant accident. So after that incident, we decided to, we and Wheels decided to work on this letter, and we found a significant consensus among business leaders, nonprofits, elected officials, and the like, that there needs to be efforts by the city to address this traffic issue. We have, of course, that accident. I know, Debbie, at the beginning of the meeting, you had mentioned that there was an accident on 181st Street that appears to have involved at least 2 cars in June of this year. There have also been accidents on 190th Street. We've spoken to community leaders who emphasize that this is an ongoing issue, and frankly, we'd like to see the city address it before there are significant injuries and fatalities. So we've drafted up this letter. It's been shared, of course, with the committee, as I understand it. It basically has 4 key points. We'd like to see traffic calming measures at key intersections, 182nd, 185th, 187th, and 189th. Those, of course, correspond to the schools that are located at those intersections. We've also asked for enforcement of existing regulations on Amsterdam. There are signs posted on both north and southbound lanes, one at 183rd, one at 186th, and also on the 184th Street, the right turn onto Amsterdam, limiting traffic to bus and local deliveries between 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. We've also asked for the inclusion of that stretch in the Open Streets program. It's speaking to the businesses on that block. Of course, we have a number of kosher establishments that our students frequent, plus many non-kosher businesses that, of course, are dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. They have communicated to us an interest in seeing more streetscape infrastructure to be able to accommodate outdoor dining for what's left of this particular season, and potentially to anticipate what we could see in terms of COVID into the next spring and summer. And lastly, we are urging that the city allocate pedestrian plaza dollars, the existing pedestrian plaza program through DOT, to infrastructure along this corridor, including the Amsterdam Avenue pedestrian plaza from 183rd to 186, which I'll remind the committee was the subject of an April 2019 resolution calling on Commissioner Trottenberg to support that particular project. So we'd like to see these program funds that the city may have available to improve infrastructure along this corridor. So those are the 4 key points. It's really, at the end of the day, it's a question of traffic safety, quality of life, and ensuring that the many educational institutions along the corridor can be safe from these types of high-speed crashes in traffic. So that's all I have to say about that. So thank you for giving me the time to speak to this issue. If I'm given the opportunity to field questions, I'm happy to answer any.
Thanks, John. Richard? Just unmute yourself. There you go.
This issue has been out there for quite a while. I was involved a couple of years ago in another effort on that. That effort came from personnel at PS 187 being seriously injured in a pedestrian accident. You've already done a lot more organizing than was done on the previous effort, and that's appreciated. One thing to note, the response that came back from DOT at that time, after a considerable period of not responding, was, we can't do anything because there's a bus route along there, and many of the conventional traffic calming measures can't be done under those circumstances. Without going into it, I'd say I felt like walking through a cow pasture at that moment. And I would accordingly move a resolution of support for this letter.
I second it.
I think what we should do, since, Jeff mentioned the 4 points, we should just include them. Now, I think we should definitely ask for traffic calming. Now, if in fact, which is what DOT told you, and it is their property, and remember, I don't work for DOT. It is their policy. They will not put speed humps, bumps, lumps, whatever they are, on any bus route, because it makes it very uncomfortable for the buses. And it also makes it impossible for the buses when the roads are slippery, I believe. But there may be other traffic calming. So that's why we say speed bumps, hump, and other traffic calming. And, because if we're adamant about that, unless they change their rules, and there's generally logic behind what they're doing, if that's what we demand, we're not going to get it, probably. But traffic calming in general, there may be other stuff they can do. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. And I don't feel like we need to overly specify. We can, I think we can ask for this to be addressed. How they get there really isn't the issue, but these pictures, I've got, 3 saved. They're so dramatic. And again, like you said, it's been an ongoing issue. Do we have anybody else from the committee who wanted to comment? All right. So who wants to make the motion? Richard, was that kind of your motion?
There's a motion made and Bruce seconded it.
Okay.
So it's out there.
And
since there's no further discussion, we can vote on it.
All right. I
How do you like that for speed, Josh?
Well done. Sorry, I'm just gonna have to help me out with the list because now I'm in 3
Eliminate
different
speed
places.
bumps.
Starting with Mary.
Muted, muted.
Okay, there you go. You're good.
Yes.
Okay. Jim Berlin,
Yes.
Gerard, sorry, Gerard Dingle. Oh, we might have lost him. Richard Allman,
Yes.
Bruce Robertson,
Yes.
Angel,
Yes.
Mariella,
Yes.
I am voting yes. Who am I? I'm missing somebody from the committee. All right, I'm going to go to give the opportunity for community board members not on the committee to vote. Sally, if you'd like to vote, or you don't have to.
Yes.
Thank you. Is Maria still with us? Maria Luna? I think she might have called it a night. And I know, right?
Eli's on.
Yes. Eli, would you like to vote in this one? Then you should unmute. He might have stepped away. Okay. With that, it appears the motion does pass to do a resolution at this time. Jim, do you want to take a first crack, or would you like somebody else to do so? James. All right, we'll duke it out later on who's gonna draft it. I can do it as well. But if somebody else could take a first crack, it would be much appreciated. Did
I was away. Did you try and you try to
yeah,
get me to do something? It's frankly so easy to do since all the material is in the letter that I think someone else might want to take a crack at it. Because, you know, the writing, and you can look at all resolutions, and the
Right,
thing is,
correct.
it can be very brief also.
Does anybody want to take a first crack at a draft?
And then we will, you know, let me just mention this
all right.
technicality too. To review it as a committee, you will send your draft out, and then we will only write back to you because we can't send emails back and forth to everybody.
Okay,
But,
all right.
and if they don't
So-
want to do it, either you or I will do it. We'll
Yeah,
duke it out.
okay. Yeah, you or I will do it. That's fine. All right, so that's good. We had another new item, but I was sort of hoping Edith could lead it. So I'm gonna, I think, defer that because she's not on the call right now. But she has raised issues just as we've gone, now that we've gone to front boarding of buses, that just sort of how it's working out. If you are using the front of the bus, you know, because of the space created between the driver and where limited mobility people might be sitting, there have been some issues, etc. But I'll have her take that up with us in October. This would be for the future, but so people know, another thing that that there's been a lot of community feedback about is that there is a group of people in the community who are really opposed and upset to lose the open street that we had in the Fort Tryon Park Drive. And that open street did come to an end on September 8th. In part, I believe, because with the reopening of the cloisters, sort of, I think it had something to do with that, and with the, and that being in the park, that there was a focus on having it during the summer high usage month. And, but there are a fair amount of people that have given feedback. And so I may want to consider in the future, probably not, we're going to have another long meeting in October, so I don't know how much I can stack in there. But, you know, for pedestrians that were using that open space, you know, they still have obviously our big, wonderful parks, and it's many miles of pathways. However, and to some extent, you know, one could argue, well, for the bicyclists, scooters, etc., well, okay, we don't have it. That's not the end. Well, whatever. But it sort of seems to me that what people are saying by saying, like, do we really want to do this? Again, at a time when we're trying to give more space to alternate forms of getting around and all of that, that do we at a time, and I think this is it's something to consider, is, you know, a Prospect Park, a Central Park, no longer have cars within the park, right? But I think then that's what that discussion is. It's not really about open streets. It's about, we do have a park with cars in it. And in other places in our beautiful city and our beautiful parks, we've stopped doing that. So it's just something that I want to say, again, it is sort of immediate in the sense that this ended on September 8th. There's a petition that went around, etc. It's not, you know, there's a lot of people who feel like, I don't know, let's keep that access. That was good access. But I think that it's more really, again, we should, if we're going to take it up, that's the frame that I'd like to put on that. So if anybody has thoughts about that as an item, you know, maybe just share them with me by email. But that's sort of my current thought on that issue. And maybe some of you have seen that petition, or seen on, you know, I've seen it online, etc. There are a lot of people who've really been having great discussions on this, pro and con and all of that. And I think that that's something that we would really benefit by hearing in committee. And then just in terms of priorities, I know that some committees sort of take this opportunity in September, and we'll certainly do this to some extent in October with the budget rankings. But I just would say overall, we, you know, there are several long-term things that have sort of come up again and again in committee, whether they're sort of safety related, whether they're congestion related, or could be other things. And there may be ways for us to think more broadly about what we put into the needs assessment. But I want people to really like think writ large of like, what do you think is important that we get to this year? And then more specifically, does any of that trigger items that we put into our budget ranking? Because we've had kind of the same list for a lot of years. So I am going to ask people to sort of like think a little bit more broadly. Let's freshen up that list. And I guess what I'm talking about here, it's just things to ferment on over the coming, I think our next meeting is in like 3 weeks, are things like, you know, traffic studies at, you know, we've talked about by the hospital, or, you know, things have come up again from the public on, you know, around Dykeman, or what have you. Or, you know, whatever it might be. I know I'm rambling at this late hour, but let's not, I feel like we often go into that budget moment and we don't have a lot of time and we're just ranking what's there, but let's just think about what are the things that we've been hearing from people that continue, you know, that just keep coming up and again. And is there a way for us both to prioritize it in our work this year, but also translate it into a statement within our budget ranking, because that is a statement of our values. And I don't feel like we've done much with our ranking really over time that's sort of gotten us anything. So, and I say that in the worst budget environment of all time.
Here in St. Louis, we're near the end of our.
So does anybody, Sally, you have a hand up, I think?
I do too.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Let's start with the committee then. Mary, and then Richard, and then Sally.
I just think it would be helpful, especially for the new people on the committee, if you ask Ebenezer to send out last year's capital and expense budget listings for this committee.
And they will be sending that out soon to get us ready. But Mary, why don't I do something Steve Simon did for his committee, but why don't I commit to that, to just at least get it on, like maybe put all our stuff onto one page from our rankings from last year? Or do you want to just see the whole thing?
No, just the committee.
Okay.
Because we're doing these committee by committee.
Yeah, I will try to get that out to you in the next 2 days. And that maybe we could see it on one sheet. I know that's how Steve did it, and it's just easier to absorb. Thank you. Good suggestion. Richard?
Support for what Marion, you were just saying. 2 issues potentially for us to consider in the future. One is a partial issue. When we address MTA issues next month, I'd like to talk about drivers and masks. It's what I'm seeing on the buses is too far short of 100% masked on the buses and on the streets where there are dispatchers. It's just way too far short of 100%. And I think we need to find a politic way to say something about that. An additional issue that I would suggest we consider is congestion on the 207th Street Bridge. And while I know congestion isn't our favorite topic sometimes, at least the thoughts I have about that bridge is that there's some very, very solvable problems. Perhaps they play into how we deal with the expense budget issues.
I had the exact same point in my notes. Thank you. Agreed.
Okay, and the
So,
last,
I think we need to bring that into the budget discussion. Don't let it not be in there.
that's fine. And the last quick thought, if anyone knows why the McCombs Dam Bridge, the 155th Street Bridge was closed down today, I'd be interested in learning about it.
It was broken, the mechanism that opens and closes it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's how I
Any
read it.
projection of time?
No, I saw a news alert a while ago, and I haven't seen anything saying that it's reopened, so.
Oof.
Total answer, much appreciated.
Sally?
2 things. One is I really like your idea of exploring further the issue with the street in Fort Tryon Park. I think that we should be looking at streets not only there, but also streets adjacent to parks. But from my standpoint, open streets, more is more. However, I also think that there have been issues with certain of the open streets in terms of things not being enforced. Some misunderstanding about what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do when an open street becomes an open restaurant. Real issues in terms of Dykeman at some point sometimes looks like a super spreader event because certain regulations aren't being enforced. I think that it would be worthwhile if y'all have time on your agenda to actually have someone from DOT and maybe the Mayor's Office of Special Enforcement here to address just overall concerns with the open streets, open restaurants programs, because they've made decisions in terms of this will carry on, and I'm not sure that they were properly managed. And I mean, at the beginning, they certainly weren't. But I think that some changes need to be made in that program. That's just my humble opinion, and you can take it for what it's worth. As far as masks though, Richard, you could actually be part of the MTA mask force. I did it last time and it was really fun. And there will be fines in the future, but I know that Debbie wants to tell us about the opportunity next week to be part of the MTA Mask Force.
I want to, let me just say this much. Sally, got what you're saying, but my concern is with MTA personnel, and I'm not sure a volunteer group is the best way to deal with
They'll
that.
find themselves the $50.
All right. Thank you, Sally, as always, for your engagement. Mariella, I'm sorry. I did not realize you had a hand up.
No, I just wanted to add maybe new business for the next meeting, which is that there is a charter school that is supposed to come in to 215th Street between Park Terrace East and Park Terrace West, which is very residential. And so just wanting to ask some questions and look into what that would mean for traffic and busing in that area, which is, you know, full of one-way streets. And so
Right. All right. We had somebody in the Q&A about that. So usually there's a traffic study. So yes, probably not next month, but let's also figure out what there should have been a traffic study, but I don't know if I'll look into it. If you don't hear from me in the next 7 days, will you please email me?
Sure. I mean, I'm also happy to follow up with this traffic report. Maybe this is a way that I will learn how all of this works. Tell me who to-
All right. So we're going to go look into it together. Okay. Thank you, Mariella. Thank you, Mariella. And the last thing before we adjourn, I just want to, the last thing that's sort of running through my mind about something that we may want to do, but I haven't talked to Curtis Young yet, is that, you know, certainly there's been a series of issues that sort of have an enforcement aspect, but have a streets aspect. And those sometimes are tricky, right? Because we can only talk about one. So that's another thing to just sort of ruminate on, and maybe we can think about having some common effort or joint effort at some time. Marielle?
Oh, someone in the attendees says that they know more. Dave Tom says he knows more about traffic study, that there wasn't a traffic study.
Okay, so let's just follow up because we really can't take it on tonight. But let's figure out when we can put it on, and then what we can, yeah. Let me just catch up to the issue. I appreciate everybody's forbearance. I know I'm always like this at the September meeting, and I warn you, I might be like this at the October meeting. But we will get it on, and thank you to Dave Tom for raising the issue. So let us do a little homework and get smart about what's happening. With that, I'd like to adjourn. Thank you so much, all of you. You're amazing. I know I have a lot of follow-ups. If it feels like I'm forgetting something, I probably did. So just ping me, please. All right, take care all. And I will get out the communication about the mask force.
Yay.
So, all right, bye.
Bye.
Night, all.